Hi everyone. So today we're going to have a look at the Azure DevOps pipelines, and we're going to see how we can use DevOps pipelines to build and deploy our application onto an on-premises VM. It can be an on-premises server running in your data center. It can be a VM running in any cloud like AWS or any other cloud, or it can even be your local machine. As part of the agenda, first we will discuss a bit on the DevOps pipelines and what are the basic concepts. We'll get ourselves familiarized with the UI of the Azure DevOps pipelines. Then we'll see how we can create build pipelines. Then we'll see how we can create and integrate your unit test onto your pipelines. And obviously, then we'll see your the deployment of the pipelines via the deployment pipelines. And we'll see a bit of tips and tricks there because when you deploy your application as it is behind the IIS, it won't work. And we'll see how we can solve that. So let's move ahead. Um, If I open the source code that I've built, it's a very simple um, .NET Core application. And what it actually does is, if I show you, it goes to the app settings. And what I've done is I've created some app settings in the app settings JSON. One is the name environment, the other one deployment. And what it does is basically reads these configs and shows them onto the web page. So if I click it over here, you can see I'm showing that variable over here, local dev and local Visual Studio, because I'm running it on my local machine. So essentially, these values are going to show up. Why we need this is when we build our pipeline, we'll see a functionality of Azure DevOps where we can inject those variables and we can change our app settings based on the environments. And that specifically used when you want to replace your connection strings and other variables based on the environment. So the functionality is very simple. It's a simple web application, and what we're doing in the startup is that we're having this configuration, and we're just reading the app settings, and we read the app setting into the environment model, which I've created over here, and um, then that basically gets injected into the controller. So if I go down here, I'm seeing the I options environment model, and its app setting is being set to the local variable. And what I'm doing essentially here is that I'm passing that environment into the view. If I go back to the view here, you can see I'm just showing that environment and the deployment, which you can see on the UI. That's pretty simple. I've also created a simple NUnit project, and all it's doing is just has 3 tests in it. All of them are getting passed. It's just to show you how you integrate with the pipelines and how you can see the status of your tests running or failing. I have already pushed this onto a repository in the Azure DevOps. And if I go back here, I can show you, um, sorry, you can see that I'm on the develop branch at the moment on the on-prem web app deployment demo repository. So I'll just open that up and show you. So if you see over here, this is the Azure DevOps dev.azure.com, and I have this um, organization named YouTube Demos. And then there is a project that I've created here called Deployment Pipelines. If I go back here on the main screen, this is the project. I'm going into that project. And if I go to repos, you can see this repo on-prem web app deployment. And I'm on the develop branch, and develop branch has my changes in there. Now, if I go back to the pipelines over here, that has everything that is related to building your code and deploying your code. So this first tab, which is the pipeline that is used to create your build pipelines, which means where it's going to get your code from and how it's going to build your code. Once it builds your code, it creates a package, and then package gets stored at a place, whether a file share or whether you want to put it onto the Azure pipelines um, area where it stores all the packages, or um, then once it builds that package, then you come down to releases. That's where you create your release pipeline, which means how it's going to get the package that is built into the pipeline, and then where it's going to deploy the package. You see all the other options. We have environment here. Environment means your dev and your staging and your production. You can create your environments here. And then when you create a release pipeline, you can tell in the release pipeline which environment to deploy to. And then your environment will have all the servers and all the services where you want to deploy. Then we have this important concept of deployment group. That is grouping of the resources where your application is going to be deployed. We will create one on-premises server here, and we'll deploy our application there. So if I go back to the pipelines here, so I'm going to create a release pipeline. I'll click on the create pipeline button. It's going to ask me where is my code, and um, I'm going to click on the classic editor, and I'm going to tell me that my code is sitting in Azure repos. So this is the team project that it's already selected, and this is the repo. If you have multiple repos, you can choose those. In this case, I have this on-prem web app deployment demo, and the branch that I'm going to use for this particular purpose is develop. So now you can configure as many pipelines as you want, and then based on the branches. So this develop is going to be deployed on my development server, which in this case is my local environment. Let's move next. Now it's asking me what sort of code template I want to use. I can click on YAML, and then I can create any custom sort of configuration I want, but I can use existing templates as well. In this case, I'm going to use .NET Core template. So if I go down here, it shows me ASP.NET Core. So I'm going to choose the ASP.NET Core, which is for the ASP.NET Core web applications. I will apply here. Now, if you see over here, it has some stages over here. You can create as many stages or tasks as you want over here, and every task will do a piece of work that you want it to do. In this case, it's a very simple one. So it's going to restore the NuGet packages that you have in your solution. So it's going to download all the NuGet packages. Then it's going to build your code. Then it's going to run your unit tests, and then it's going to publish the code to whichever place you want it to publish to. If I click on the pipeline, it gives me high-level settings of the pipelines. Remember, when the code gets built, it gets built on an agent. It's very similar to the concept of if you have used Jenkins or some other CI/CD tools. So the build happens on a particular machine, which is called an agent. Now it's asking me which agent I want to use. It gives me by default a lot of options of Ubuntu and Mac OS or different versions of Windows. So I'm going to choose Windows 2019 version, and this is going to be on the Azure DevOps side. Although I can configure it to deploy on the agents that I have, but I can also use Azure DevOps own pool of agents. Um, then it asks me what sort of project do I have. So from the root, it's going to take all the CS projects, CS project files, and then use that to build. I can go ahead and give a specific project name as well. This one will work in our case, but just to show you, I can go ahead and if I go down here, if I go to where the code is, yeah. So I can go here, and this is my app, and essentially I can just take this one as well. I can say um, go here from the root, go down to this folder, and inside this folder, whatever CS project file is, get that. And I can actually give the actual CS project name as well, but in this case, I'm just putting a star. Now it's asking me what test projects do you have, and I'm going to say anything that ends with test, take that. I can obviously give the exact test name as well, but in case I have more than one unit test projects, I can just give a rule. So in this case, it is ending at test, capital T, ESTS. And if I go back in here, all I'm doing is I'm saying anything that ends with test, get the CS project there, and that's my test. If I go down here, this is about my source code, which I configured earlier. There are some more options over here. Do we want to clean the environment before doing a new build? And then if you want to have, if you want to tag after the success or the failure. So if I say on success, it's going to create a tag in the repos, the git tag. And I can give the format as well. I don't want the tag in this case. And then if I check this, it's going to send me an email on the status of the build, which is fine in this case. Now that is about the whole job that's going to run on the agent. It has a lot of options here in terms of how many agents you want the build to be built on, whether you want it on the multiple ones, do you want parallelism or not. I'm going to keep it simple in this case because it's a simple application. Let's move to the next one. You can see that it's taken the value that I set over here because they are all linked. If I come down here, there is this link button, which actually creates sort of a variable that gets down to all the stages on the pipeline. So if I go down here, it has picked that value up on here. It also has a lot of options in terms of the NuGet feeds. You can choose a particular NuGet feed you want to get the NuGets from. Next is my build. That is how it's going to build your project. And next one is the test, how it's going to build and run our tests. And if I want to publish my test coverage. And the last one is about publishing the actual package. So it's going to zip the publish package. Do you want to zip it or not? It's based on that. So if we zip it, you will see the packages .zipped. And where do we want to publish it? The last one is our published artifact. Now, I just want to show you one thing. If we come down here in the pipeline, I want to show you how we can, or maybe we can do that later on, how we can replace the variables or in our app settings.json. We'll get to that one. First, we'll deploy the simple one. So now that our build is ready, I'm going to save it. Let me save it. I will not queue it first. Save it. Some of the other options over here are the concept of variables. So you can create your variables that you can refer in your pipelines. So in this case, there are these variables. You might have seen there was a build configuration variable, which talks about whether it's a release or debug, build platform. All these variables that you've used here, you can use them in the pipelines. Trigger talks about how you can trigger. You can either trigger on a particular commit or an event. So if I enable continuous integration here, then I can say build it automatically when something gets checked into the develop branch, or I can set other branches as well. And then I can even have path filters as well, that on a particular branch, if a particular path gets changed, a file in a particular path gets changed, then trigger the build. So we can schedule, specify those things here. We can also schedule a build over here. If I click on that, I can choose what time I want to run the build on. I will delete it in this case. In this case, we're going to trigger it manually. And then there are further things in terms of how long you want to retain your build packages. You can talk about the build package formats, which you can see over here. You can specify that. And there are many other options like what sort of badge you want when your build gets success or gets failed on your Azure DevOps. Okay, going back. Now that that's there, I'm going to queue it. So it's going to create the build. I'm just going to give it first build. Going to use the agent pool as Azure Partners. I can use my private pool of machines as well as agents. And let's do it. So now you can see over here, it has one agent because in this case we had only one agent. It has queued the job over there, and you can see it's now getting processed onto that agent VM, and you can see all the logs coming in here. Okay, so you can see that the tests have run now, and we can see that there is one artifact that's created. If I click on the artifact, it will show me. Um, if you remember in the pipelines, we gave this name of drop. There was a by default name, and now it has created a .zip file, which we saw because we gave the compression option there. So that's why it created .zip file. If I download this, you will see that this is actually a compiled .NET Core application. Now what we're going to do is that's how it builds the code and creates the package. Now we're going to go back to the releases, and we're going to see how we can create a release pipeline. Release pipeline, as I said, is the pipeline which deploys your application onto the host resource. So in order to do that, I'll click on the new pipeline, and now it's asking me the template I'm going to use because we're going to deploy it behind the IIS. So I'm going to use IIS. So it gives me a lot of option in IIS. The last option is IIS web deployment. I'm going to use that. And you can give it whatever name, deploy to IIS, for example. Now, let's go back. Now, each step or each stage will have a lot of tasks in it that you can create. So if I go here, there are two tasks in here. One is the initial configuration of your IIS, and the second one is how your package is going to be deployed in IIS. Now, you can see over here that just about what this whole stage name and the website name that you want to give. We'll give it a demo website. So you will see the name that we give here will show up under the IIS. You can also see over here by default it's using port 80. Let's suppose we want to use a different port. So I'm going to change it, and I'm going to change it to port 90 so that it binds to port 90. If I go down here, you'll see an interesting thing here called deployment group. So if I go here, there is no deployment group. Let's quickly go ahead and create a deployment group. I'm in the deployment group, and this is an interesting concept because we're going to deploy on on-prem server, or in this case, on-prem laptop, this laptop. Um, Azure DevOps needs a way to identify that particular resource. So we're going to give it a name, local dev laptop. Can be your server, can be anything. Create it. Now this is an interesting thing. Um, I just need to run this PowerShell script on my machine, and then it will register with the Azure DevOps pipeline as a particular deployment target. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say use personal access token, and I'm going to copy this. Now I will go here and I'll run PowerShell. Remember, we need to run PowerShell as the administrator because this requires um, administrator access. I'm going to paste the script that I copied from there. I'm going to run it. So I don't need tags in this stage. Tags is the way to label your environment. And then you can use those tags while deploying your application. And then based on your tag, it chooses which server to deploy to. I'm going to enter here. Okay, done. So it has registered this machine as the DevOps pipeline. Now let's go back here. Sorry, as the deployment target. If I go to target server, you can see my machine is now registered over here. Now, if I go back to that tab and refresh it, go down, you can see my deployment target that I created. Now, it means that when I deploy this application, it will deploy on my local machine. That's the way where the tags are used. We don't need to use any tags here. All the things remain the same. Now, coming here, what do we want over here? Enable IIS means that if your IIS is not enabled on your laptop, it will enable on your server, it will install that feature. We already have that. We don't need to do it. Coming down here, This is the name that we changed in the first step. Now, where do we want to deploy it? I'm going to say deploy it, create a folder, demo website, and then deploy it over there. Do we want to create a pool? Let's create a new app pool there. And you can see it has picked up the port 90 configuration. And let's give the app pool name demo app pool. And we'll keep all the settings as is. Now coming next, what name we want to give it? That's display name, that's fine. We don't want the virtual application at this stage. So that is all good. So now interesting thing over here. We want to, I showed you, if I go back, I showed you in the app settings, we had two variables. We want to replace these variables to show different environment and different deployments. So the way to do it is you take this, the way is you take this, the name of the object and then the value inside the object and you put a dot there. So it's an app setting dot environment. So let's say, let's create a variable over here. Let's call it dot environment and give it, let's call it dev machine. Let's create another one. String dot, what's the name? Deployment. And we'll say deployed. And save it. We go back to the pipeline. Coming down here. Now we need to tell which files it need JSON file it needs to get. So we'll just say star.json. So get all the JSON files and then replace the variables in those JSON files. So this pattern is important. So it will go and under this pattern, whatever the file comes in, it will take them. If it finds that variable name, it will replace the value. So that's pretty much it. Let's now save it. And let's, so our release pipeline is ready. If we go back here, this is our pipeline. Now we need to give the artifact. So which artifact it's going to deploy? I'll click on the artifact and it will show me the artifact that has been created. So I created build because we are going to choose from the build pipelines. And this is the pipeline, this is the project name. And then we'll see that there is this deployment pipeline that we created. This is the build pipeline. And once we choose the build pipeline, it shows us the whatever packages we have that are built. So we're going to take the latest one. You can choose any particular version as well. So we're going to take the latest one. So now when it runs, it will, from this build pipeline, it will take the latest package and then deploy onto IIS. Let's save it. Now to deploy this, we need to create a release that will run this pipeline and deploy the application. So let's choose, this is the trigger in this case, which is manual. Artifact, it has already chosen the artifact because it took the latest one. There is only one, so it took that one. We're going to create it. Now let's go to the release. Now, because we are manually triggering it, we need to click on the deploy button to manually trigger it. Otherwise, we could have in the pipeline, we could have set up to deploy it on a schedule or triggered based on the build pipeline. Just to confirm, we have the variable sitting in here, all good. Now let's click on deploy. Let's deploy it. Okay, it's in progress now. So it's now connecting to the on-premises server. In this case, it's my laptop. It's going to create all the IIS projects under the IIS. It's going to create all the folders and deploy the package application there. So if I go down here, if I show you, this is the inet pub www root, and we told the pipeline to create a demo website folder, and inside that it created my files. Now, if I go to IIS, let me open IIS. So you can see in the IIS, this demo website is created. And if we check the bindings, you can see the bindings is port 90. Now, by default, when you do it, and when you click on the website on the browse, it won't work. The reason is your .NET Core application is basically a console application. It's not a web application. So to explain it, if I go back to the code, you can see that it has program.cs and it has the main, just like the console application, which essentially means this is a console application. And what we're doing here, we're creating a host builder, which means it has sort of a browser inbuilt, sort of a inbuilt server, web server on which your application runs. Now, if you run it as it is, it won't work. The way it works is your IIS requires the web.config. If I go back here, you can see there is this web.config over here. Now, to run it, you need to install another thing. I'll just open the link over here. So basically, you need to uh, install this ASP.NET Core module. Once you download this and install it, then you'll be able to access your application. So I'm going to go there, HTTP, localhost. Because we're deployed on port 90, I'm going to port 90. Now you can see it deployed it, and you can see it's changing the variable, and it's also changing my deployment method to be deployed via Azure Devops pipelines. If I go back here, you can see the history of when my pipeline ran. And that's essentially pretty much it, how it works. Thank you.